My mother's will was supposed to bring a quiet, somber closure to a chapter of life I had always found complicated. Instead, it acted like a lit match, thrown directly onto a lifetime of spilled gasoline, igniting a blaze that would consume every last vestige of our fractured family. I, 28-year-old Ida, stood frozen in the overly air-conditioned, sterile lawyer's office, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely clutch the crisp, legal-sized document. Its words didn't just outline the distribution of assets. They confirmed my deepest, most painful suspicion, one I had carried since I was 16. In her heart, I was never truly her daughter. The core of the estate was straightforward, a fact that made the sting of the addendum all the more cruel. The modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in the suburbs where I'd grown up, and a small savings account, were to be split evenly between me and my younger sister, Rose. That was the fair, the legal, the expected part. But it was the handwritten addendum, read aloud by the lawyer in a tone of profound discomfort, that made the blood drain from my face and a cold dread settle in my stomach. To my beloved daughter, Rose, the script began, a looping, familiar handwriting that felt like a physical slap. The words "beloved daughter" were a blade twisting. It was as if I, Ida, were already a ghost, an afterthought erased from the final narrative. I bequeath the family heirlooms. My grandmother's emerald necklace, the vintage Rolex that belonged to your father, and the contents of the sealed safety deposit box at First National Bank, number 747. The contents of this box are for you alone, my golden child, to secure the brilliant future I have always dreamed for you. I felt the air leave my lungs in a silent, painful whoosh. The emerald necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was an artifact from a family legend I had never felt part of, a glittering symbol of an elegance and history that seemed to exclude me. The Rolex was my father's, a man whose warm smile and gentle eyes were my happiest, faintest memories, a man I had lost too young. But the safety deposit box? That was a new, terrifying level of mystery and exclusion. My mother had never, in all our strained conversations, mentioned its existence. Rose, 22, sitting primly beside me in a black dress that looked more expensive than anything I owned, didn't even flinch. She didn't look surprised, only satisfied, a small, smug smile playing on her lips as her hand rested instinctively on her still flat stomach. A recent development she had been masterfully using for months to garner sympathy and special treatment. This final, posthumous disparity was a fresh, deep wound sliced directly over an old, festering scar. My entire life had been a study in stark contrast to Rose's. Where I was quiet, observant, and found solace in books and numbers, she was loud, effervescent, and commanded every room she entered. Where I worked after-school jobs at the local diner to buy my own school supplies and clothes, Rose had her every whim, from designer jeans to a brand-new car for her 16th birthday, catered to without question. When I graduated college with honors in finance, my mother's praise was a terse, backhanded, "It's good you have something practical to fall back on." When Rose dropped out of her art history degree after her first year, it was met with a sigh and a forgiving, "She's just finding her true passion, it's a journey of the soul." And now, in death, my mother had found one last, impeccably cruel way to underline the fundamental difference between us, to codify her favoritism into a legal document. The straightforward division of the house and savings was the initial spark of the conflict, but the mystery of the safety deposit box was the kindling that threatened to become an inferno, consuming my every thought. What could possibly be inside that was so much more valuable than a simple, fair, and equal split of the entire estate? Was it stacks of untraceable cash? Old, valuable stock certificates? A final, written testament declaring Rose the undisputed favorite once and for all? I tried desperately to push it from my mind, to focus on the practicalities of my own independent life. I had my own career, a good job as a financial analyst, my own small but tidy apartment that I paid for with my own money. I didn't need their heirlooms, their secrets, or their conditional love. But Rose, true to form, could not let it lie. The quiet dignity I sought was not part of her playbook. A week after the soul-crushing reading of the will, she called me, her voice dripping with a saccharine, faux sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Ida, darling, we really need to talk about the house. Joel and I are going to be starting a family, and your apartment is just so small and impersonal. It makes more sense for us, for the future of your niece or nephew, to have the family home. It has a yard and memories." Joel was her latest boyfriend, a jobless, aspiring musician with a carefully cultivated air of artistic suffering and a penchant for drinking my mother's good whiskey when he thought no one was looking. The thought of him, with his perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and lack of ambition, lounging on the sofa in my childhood home, the very place where I had spent countless hours hiding in my room to avoid my mother's criticisms and the echoing sounds of their perfect mother-daughter bond, made me feel physically ill. "It's not my house, Rose. It's our house equally, as per the will you just heard," I replied, my voice tight, straining to maintain a veneer of calm. "And my apartment suits my needs perfectly. If you and Joel want the house exclusively, you are more than welcome to secure a mortgage and buy out my half. I can have my lawyer draw up the paperwork." There was a sharp, theatrical intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Buy you out? What, Ida? Be serious. We don't have that kind of money. I'm pregnant, for God's sake. Have you no heart? Mom would have wanted me to have stability. She would have wanted her grandchild to have a proper home. Mom's wants are irrelevant now, Rose," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, steady tone that surprised even me. "She expressed her wants in her will. The law is clear. We either sell it and split the proceeds, or one of us buys the other out. There is no third option where you just get it." The conversation devolved rapidly from there, a bitter, predictable rehash of every argument we'd ever had. She called me greedy and cold-hearted. I called her entitled and manipulative. She played the pregnant and desperate card with the skill of a seasoned actress. I reminded her firmly that her life choices were not my financial responsibility. She finally hung up on me with a slammed receiver, but the silence that followed was anything but peaceful. I knew with a sinking certainty in my gut that it was far from over. The next day my work phone buzzed with a call from my mother's estate lawyer. His voice was grave. Rose, he informed me, was formally contesting the will. Her claim was as audacious as it was infuriating, that our mother had been of unsound mind and mental incompetence, when she added the handwritten addendum, and more shockingly that I, Ida, had exerted undue influence over our vulnerable mother to secure my half of the primary estate. I was utterly stunned, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. It was a complete, breathtaking inversion of the truth. I was the one who had been emotionally pushed out, the one with the least influence, the one who called once a week out of duty and received clipped, disinterested responses. The sheer, brazen audacity of her lie left me breathless and shaking. This was no longer a family squabble. This was war. I immediately hired my own legal representation, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Evans who specialized in probate and estate litigation. As we began the arduous process of building our case, gathering my financial records, my phone logs, testimony from friends about the distant nature of my relationship with our mother, my mind kept circling back, obsessively, to the safety deposit box. That was the key. That was the source of Rose's unshakable confidence, the trump card she believed made her invincible. I needed to know what was inside. The problem was it was legally sealed, and only Rose had been explicitly granted access by the will's addendum. Driven by a potent cocktail of white-hot anger, a desperate need for answers, and the chilling fear of losing what was rightfully mine, I took matters into my own hands. I started digging. I spent my evenings and weekends in the dusty, silent garage of the contested house, sifting through my mother's old things, which were still packed in a chaotic jumble of cardboard boxes. I found old, crumbling photo albums filled with pictures of a smiling Rose, my school reports with mediocre grades circled in red pen, and stacks of mundane paperwork, decades-old utility bills, expired warranties, tax returns. Then, tucked inside the hollowed-out pages of a battered copy of a cheap romance novel, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was a key. Small, brass, and utterly unremarkable, but it was attached to a tiny yellowed tag with the number 747 handwritten on it. The same number as the safety deposit box. This changed everything. Possessing the key wasn't the same as having legal access. It was a potential legal landmine. But it was a thread, a tangible connection to the truth, and I was determined to pull it until the whole tapestry unraveled. The next day I went to the First National Bank. I didn't try to access the box. That would have been foolish and illegal. Instead, I asked to speak with the branch manager, a kindly-looking man in his 50s named Mr. Albright. I showed him the key and a copy of the will, explaining my predicament in a carefully measured tone, playing the part of a confused and grieving daughter. I understand completely that my sister is the only one with legal access according to this document, I said, injecting a slight tremor into my voice. But with this legal contest underway, I'm trying to understand my mother's final wishes. It's all so confusing. Is there any way you can at least tell me when the box was originally opened? Or what the rental history is? Anything that might provide some context. Mr. Albright, his face a mask of professional sympathy, nodded. I can't disclose any contents, of course. That would be a serious breach of policy, he said softly. He typed something into his computer, his eyes scanning the screen. But I can tell you that this box, number 747, was originally opened 30 years ago. It was rented by a Margaret Shaw. Margaret Shaw. That was my mother's name. 30 years ago. I would have been just a toddler, a mere 2 years old. The timeline felt profoundly significant, a clue I couldn't yet decipher. Has it been accessed recently? I asked, holding my breath. He scanned the screen again. It was accessed once, the day after your mother's passing. By a Rose Miller. Of course. She hadn't wasted a single moment. I thanked Mr. Albright profusely and left the bank, my mind racing, trying to fit this new piece into the puzzle. Rose already knew what was inside. Whatever it was, it had given her the confidence to launch this scorched-earth legal battle against me. The pressure mounted over the next few weeks, a slow, suffocating squeeze. Rose and Joel began a vicious social media campaign, painting me as a money-hungry, child-hating shrew who was cold-heartedly trying to steal my pregnant sister's inheritance and leave her unborn child destitute. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, aunts, uncles, cousins from my mother's side, began sending me emails and Facebook messages, urging me to be the bigger person, to remember that family is everything, and to do what's right. My mother's old friends looked at me with a mixture of pity and sharp disapproval when I ran into them at the grocery store. The weight of their collective misinformed judgment was suffocating. I was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, based entirely on lies. One particularly difficult evening, after a long day of dealing with my lawyer and avoiding toxic messages, I found myself drawn back to the empty house. I needed to feel some connection not to my mother, but to the few precious happy memories I had, most of which involved my father before he passed away when I was 5. I wandered into his old study, a room my mother had largely left untouched. It still smelled faintly of old books and his pipe tobacco, a scent that always brought me a fragile sense of comfort. I sat at his old, heavy oak desk, running my fingers over the scratches and ink stains. On a whim, I slid down to the floor and looked underneath. There, just as I remembered from my childhood, was a loose floorboard. As a little girl, I'd used the space beneath it as a secret hiding spot for my diary, a place to pour out my feelings where my mother wouldn't find them. My heart leapt into my throat. With some effort, I pried the warped board up. The space was dusty and filled with cobwebs, but nestled inside was a small, locked metal firebox. It was too small for the key I'd found. Frustration welled up in me. I was so close, always so close to answers, only to be met with another locked door. I was about to shove the box back in its hiding place when I noticed the manufacturer's name etched onto the small, sturdy lock. Security key. My breath hitched. It was the same brand as the safety deposit box key. It was a desperate, crazy long shot, but hope flared within me. I rushed back to my apartment, the small box clutched tightly in my hands. I laid both keys side by side on my kitchen table. They were identical in style and size. With hands trembling so violently I could barely hold them steady, I inserted the safety deposit box key into the lock on the small firebox. It slid in perfectly. I turned it. It clicked open. The sound echoed in the silent apartment. I lifted the lid. There were no stacks of cash, no jewels. The box contained only a few seemingly innocuous documents. There was my own original birth certificate, listing Margaret and Robert Shaw as my parents. There was a life insurance policy for my father, Robert Shaw, made out to my mother as the sole beneficiary. But it was a second, smaller document paperclipped to the back of the policy that made the entire world drop out from under me. It was a DNA test result, dated from just 3 years ago. The subject listed was me, Ida Miller. The result was stated in cold, clinical terms. 0% probability of maternity relative to Margaret Shaw. I wasn't her daughter. The addendum, the favoritism, the coldness, it wasn't just a personality flaw. It was a reflection of a biological truth she had known for years. I sat on my cold apartment floor, the papers scattered around me like fallen leaves, feeling like a complete stranger in my own skin, in my own life. Who was I? If Margaret wasn't my mother, who was? Why had she kept me? Why had she never, ever told me? The pieces of the horrifying puzzle began to snap into place with a terrifying clarity. The life insurance policy from my father's death was substantial, a sum that would have set someone up comfortably in those days. My father had died in a car accident when I was 5. Had she collected that money? Had she kept the child who wasn't hers, a living, breathing lie, for the financial payout? The emerald necklace, the Rolex, the secret in the safety deposit box. Was it all blood money? My father's blood money? I knew what I had to do. I went back to the bank the next day, this time with my lawyer, Miss Evans, in tow. We were armed with the DNA test and the life insurance policy. We presented our case to Mr. Albright and the bank's legal counsel, arguing that the contents of the safety deposit box were not merely assets but were directly and critically relevant to the probate case and, more importantly, to my fundamental identity and personal history. After a lengthy, tense discussion behind closed doors, and given the extraordinary, undeniable nature of the evidence we presented, a highly unusual compromise was reached. The box would be opened in a private viewing room with my lawyer, a bank representative, and both Rose and myself present. Its contents would be documented and considered as evidence for the probate court. Rose was summoned. She arrived, furious and flustered, with a sullen Joel trailing behind her like a shadow. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that I could force my way to the truth. We stood in the sterile, silent, windowless room, the air thick with animosity. Mr. Albright inserted his master key and I, with a steady hand that belied the storm inside me, inserted mine. The long metal box slid out of its cavity. It was heavier than I had imagined. Rose made a move to snatch it, but Mr. Albright was faster and more authoritative. He placed it carefully on the polished mahogany table. "For the record," he stated formally and lifted the lid. There were no gleaming jewels, no bundles of bonds. The box was filled with neat, bundled stacks of $100 bills, a thick stack of old, faded letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon, and a single, smaller velvet jewelry box. But it was the black and white photograph lying on top of it all that caught my eye and stopped my heart. It was a picture of my mother, Margaret, looking younger, softer, and happier than I had ever seen her, with her arm wrapped affectionately around another woman. The other woman, who shared Margaret's smile but had kinder eyes, was holding a baby. And the other woman was me. An older, wearier, but unmistakable version of me. With hands that shook now not from fear, but from a profound, life-altering anticipation, I picked up the top letter from the stack and carefully unfolded the brittle paper. "My dearest Maggie," it began, the handwriting elegant but rushed. "I don't have much time. The doctors say it's spreading too fast. Please, you have to take her. You have to take Ida. Robert will never know. He'll think she's yours. He's so excited for the baby and my heart breaks that I won't be there to see it. I can't bear the thought of her going into the system, of being alone in the world. You're my only sister, my only true friend. Please love her as your own. Her father is gone and I will be soon. All I have left is this life insurance policy from my own estate. It's for her. For her future, for her education. Keep it safe in this box until she's old enough to understand. Please, Maggie, promise me you'll take care of my little girl." The letter was signed with a final, flowered-ish, "Your loving sister, Eleanor." I looked from the photograph to the letter, then back again. The woman holding me, the woman with my eyes. My real mother. Eleanor. Margaret wasn't my mother, she was my aunt. My whole life, the constant favoritism, the emotional distance, the coldness, it wasn't because I was inherently unlovable. It was because I was a living, breathing, daily reminder of the sister she had lost, a burdensome promise she had reluctantly shouldered, a child that was not her own, forced upon her in a moment of tragedy. The life insurance policy in the box wasn't from my father, Robert. It was from my real mother, Eleanor, her final act to provide for me, a nest egg intended solely for my future. Rose was staring white-faced at the bundles of cash, her avarice momentarily overshadowing the shocking revelation. "All this time," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "She told me there was a secret, something that would make everything right, that would secure my future. She said this box was my safety net, my reward for being her real daughter." "It was never yours, Rose," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, filled with a newfound strength that came from finally knowing the truth. "It was mine. All of it. The money, the heirlooms you cherish. I'd wager they were bought with money that belonged to my biological mother, Eleanor. It was all for me. You were never protecting her legacy. You were trying to steal mine." The legal battle ended almost as soon as it began. Confronted with the heartfelt, tragic letters from Eleanor, the irrefutable DNA test, and the life insurance policy that clearly named me as the intended beneficiary, Rose's case for undue influence and mental incompetence collapsed into dust. The entire estate was re-evaluated by the probate court. The house, the savings, the heirlooms. The judge ruled that they were all part of an estate built, in large part, with funds that were legally and morally mine, funds that Margaret had commingled with her own. The court invalidated the handwritten addendum entirely. The entire estate was awarded to me, the rightful heir of Eleanor. The fallout was nuclear, devastating the already barren landscape of our family. Rose screamed, cried, and accused me of forging the documents, of orchestrating an elaborate malicious scheme. Joel, seeing his meal ticket vanish before his eyes, turned on Rose, shouting at her in the hallway outside the courtroom before slinking away, never to be seen again. My aunt's circle of friends was left reeling. The perfect polished image of our family she had so carefully cultivated now shattered into a million ugly pieces. In the end, after the dust had settled and the legal documents were stamped and filed, I made a choice. I sold the house. I couldn't live with its ghosts, its echoes of a love I never received and a life that was built on a foundation of lies and silence. I kept the emerald necklace and my father's Rolex, not for their monetary value, but as a tangible, complicated link to the past, to the woman who raised me but never loved me as her own, and to the father who died believing I was his, whose memory was the one pure thing I could cling to. The money from the safety deposit box, my real mother Eleanor's final desperate gift of love, I placed in a high-yield savings account and a conservative investment portfolio, a foundation of security that was truly, unquestionably mine, a mother's love finally realized, albeit decades too late. I also made one final, calculated decision. I offered Rose a small, but not insignificant lump sum of money from the sale of the house. It was not for her. It was for her child, my niece or nephew, an innocent party in this whole sordid drama. The offer came with a non-negotiable condition. She had to sign a legally binding document severing all future financial and legal claims against me, and she had to agree to strict, permanent no contact. After weeks of bitter silence, her lawyer contacted mine. He took the money. Her hatred for me, it seemed, was finally outweighed by her desperation. She and a newly sobered-up Joel moved to another state shortly after, their relationship a hollow, fractured thing, crumbling under the immense weight of their own shattered expectations and entitlement. As for me, I finally truly found the peace that had eluded me my entire life. The gnawing mystery was solved. The exhausting, demoralizing battle was over. I knew who I was at last. Not Margaret's unloved, burdensome daughter, but Eleanor's cherished one, a truth kept from me for nearly 3 decades out of grief, obligation, and resentment. I had started this journey with a will that broke me, and I ended it with a truth that, however painful and tragic, finally, unequivocally set me free. I was no longer just Ida, the rejected daughter, the perpetual outsider. I was Ida, the survivor, the heir to my own story, finally home.